Ever wondered why some readers bail only after one chapter? Your first chapter does not have to explain the entire world or introduce each and every single character or prove that you write beautifully. It has one job, and that is to make the reader turn the page. And if readers are quitting one chapter in, it's usually because of one of these 5 mistakes. Today, I'm going to go through 5 reasons why your first chapter might be losing readers and how to fix each one. Stick around to the end because I'll show you how to make sure your first chapter delivers on the promise of your genre. Number 1 is probably the most common one, and that is that you're starting too early. I see a lot of writers writing that their character is waking up or we're getting their entire life story, the backstory, when they were born. The readers doesn't have to know that. Not at this stage, not unless it is important to the story. And it's really important that you hear this because it's a lot better a lot of times, at least I think so, to like be dropped in medias res where things are happening in the middle of a scene. That is much more engaging for me as a reader than, hearing that someone put their makeup on, went to the bathroom, drank their coffee. I don't care unless, I don't know, something is wrong with the coffee. You don't want to talk about ordinary routines. You don't want to be explaining the world or reflecting on backstory. Sometimes those scenes can work, but only if there's already tension in them. Most of the time, they delay the story, and the first chapter should show the reader that the character's life is about to be disrupted. An example from a very popular book, like The Hunger Games, is the fact that Katniss, it is a scene where she wakes up, but she wakes up and she feels at the side of her bed where her sister usually sleeps, but that place is empty, which means that her sister got up before her. And why did she do that? That is what we're wondering as readers. And it is because of the reaping, and her sister couldn't sleep. So now we already feel some sort of tension. We don't yet know what the reaping is. And, the author don't have to explain because we will know in a few pages. So, yeah, think about make that the first scene has to matter for the story. It has to have conflict. And how you can fix this is to actually try to find a place in your story, right? Like that point where your story is like we're still in the ordinary world, but it's just before the disruption that sets the story in motion. That's probably the perfect place for you to start your story. And to avoid this mistake, I want you to ask yourself, what is the first meaningful disruption? Where does the character have to make a choice? What scene would the reader need in order to understand that the story has begun? I want you to look at your first 5 pages and think about this. If nothing changes, if there's nothing at stake, there is no conflict, then you're starting your story too early. Number 2 is explaining instead of creating curiosity. First chapters often fail because the writer thinks that the reader needs to understand everything. And what they will do then is that they will, tell the backstory, talk about all the relationship everyone has, to tell the backstory, talk about the political situation, talk about the magic system. Stuff like that is too much information, and we definitely do not want that at the beginning of the story, because at the beginning of the story we don't yet care about the characters, and we don't have that emotional investment that makes us curious about everything. We don't want to know everything yet. We want to have something that makes us curious about what is happening in the story. And if you're offloading too much information, then that will slow down the story so much that we will probably DNF it. And don't get me wrong here, like the intention is very good that you want to explain stuff, but the reader, that will confuse the reader, because everything that is explained, we think that matters for the story. And if it doesn't matter for the story, then it's only you as the author who needs to know each and every single cron and nook of your story. Readers do not have to know everything in chapter 1. They need to care enough to want to know the answers later. And how you can fix this is that you can cut the explanation and plant questions instead. Trust the readers to keep going in order to find the answers. And I want you to ask yourself, am I explaining something that the readers does not need to know yet? Could I reveal this enough through action or dialogue later? Am I answering questions before the reader has time to ask them? Number 3 is the fact that your protagonist isn't active enough. The first chapter can sometimes have a really beautiful writing, but still feel very passive. And this is often if things are happening around the character, but the character just observes it, or if you're like trying to explain things and just putting the character in the scene, almost like info dumping, like, okay, yeah, but we understand that they're at the school. Why are you telling us the history of the school unless it actually matters for the story? Sometimes the character thinks but does not act, or other people make the choices. If the scene mainly is there to introduce information, that won't be strong enough for a first chapter. Readers connect faster when characters want something, avoid something, hide something, chooses something, or reacts under pressure. So try to make sure that your first chapter has that. And readers don't just want to meet your protagonist. We want to see them in action so that we can create a picture of them and get emotionally involved with them. But this does not mean that your character has to be heroic or something like that. They can actually be the opposite. They could lie, avoid conversations, take risks, or stuff like that. That as long as they are active and not passive. Maybe they will pursue a goal or refuse help, hide evidence, send a message, delete a message. Choose comfort over courage. That tells us a lot about the character, and this is what we want at the beginning of the story. Your protagonist does not need to save the world in chapter 1, but they do need to want something, avoid something, or make some kind of choice. And how do you fix this? You can give your protagonist a scene level wand. An example of this is that maybe your character wants to get through a wedding without seeing her ex. Or maybe your protagonist wants to hide the fact that his business has failed for his family. Or maybe your protagonist wants to make a pitch, but without anyone noticing that she's not prepared. And if you're struggling with this, I recommend that you read Story Genius by Lisa Cron. This is a great book for you to create friction on a scene level. I use this when I plan my scenes, and it has really helped me with all of my writing. I will link the video where I talk about this book in the description box, so you can watch that after this video. But yeah, Lisa Cron really helped me create better scenes all in all. So if you're struggling with this, check her out. I also want you to ask yourself, what does my protagonist want in this scene? What are they trying to avoid? And what choices do they make? Number 4 is the fact that there is no emotional reason to keep on reading. And a common mistake here is the fact that the first scene or chapter has a lot of things happening, but we don't know what's at stake for the character, so we actually don't care. Like, if something happens and you don't know why it matters, we won't care. You need to create that emotional hook, otherwise the chapter might fall flat. And some emotional stakes can be embarrassment, rejection, fear of failure, fear of not living up to the expectations of your parents, fear of getting your heart broken, or maybe fear of losing your independence. It might be anything that makes your character uncomfortable. And I want you to remember that plot makes things happen, emotions makes readers care. A first chapter does not need explosions, it needs consequence. The reader needs to feel why this moment matters to the specific character. The first chapter does not need explosions. It needs consequences. The reader needs to feel and understand why this moment matters for the character. And how do you fix it? Well, try to connect the external events with an internal wound, a fear, a desire, or a problem. An example of this could be the external event that she loses her job. Your character loses their job. And the emotional stake, that might be that the job was the entire reason why she moved to a new country. And the only proof she had that leaving home was not a mistake. Now that event matters for the character, and now we really, really connect with her because we feel the same pain that she does. I want you to ask yourself, why does this scene matter to the protagonist emotionally? What could they lose? And what are they afraid of will happen with it? Once again, if you want to write better scenes and like see that each scene jacks into the next one, read this book because it really, really helps and has a great framework for exactly that. Number 5 is probably the most advanced, but maybe also the most helpful advice. And that is that if your chapter does not have a turn, it doesn't matter to the reader. What do I mean by this? The first chapter should not end on the same emotional state, in the same emotional state as the story began. Something should shift. That shift could be a new information, a decision, a threat, a reveal, a mistake, an invitation, a refusal, a discovery, or maybe change in relationship dynamic. The reader should reach the end of this chapter feeling, okay, I need to know what happens next. You know, if your chapter starts with the fact that your character is feeling stuck and ends with the fact that your character is feeling stuck and there is no drama in between, there is no escalation, there is no pressure point, there is no emotional tension, why should we keep reading? This is like so important that we have these sort of mini story arcs with like baby plot points in each and every single scene, in each and every single chapter, as well as in the entire story. Especially in the beginning, those are so important because we only have a few pages until the reader will decide if they're going to finish it or not. And here I want you to ask yourself, what is different at the end of chapter 1? What questions does the ending raise? What pressure has increased? I promised I would talk a little bit about how you make sure that your first chapter delivers on your genre expectations. And here's what that means. The first chapter is not only about the craft, it's also about the positioning. So an example of this, a romance novel should promise emotional tension or chemistry. A thriller should promise danger, mystery, or suspense. A fantasy should promise wonder, power, threat, or world intrigue. A feel-good novel should promise warmth, emotional change, and a place or situation that readers want to spend time in. And nonfiction, of course, will promise clarity, transformation, or relief in form of a specific problem. Your first chapter is your promise. It tells the reader what kind of story it is that you're telling and what kind of emotional experience they're signing up for, and also why they should spend their time with you. So let me know in the comments which of these mistakes that you've caught in your own writing. I'm going to be honest with you, I've caught all 5 of them in my own. And I feel like this is how I grow as a writer, when I catch myself trying to cut corners and stuff like that. Being honest about it and sharing my experience is also how we can grow together. So please let me know in the comments which one of these you think is the hardest one. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.